my name is Marcus, and I am making this video about units 7.1 to 7.4. To start off, the Young Turks were a group of Turkish people that lived in the Ottoman Empire. They advocated for Turkification, which was to make all citizens in the Ottoman Empire identify with Turkish culture. This led to the Ottoman Empire becoming very Turkish. Later, Kemal Atatürk led the Turkish people to beat the British away from Turkey and reform Turkey to be more Western. Moving on, in Russia, or USSR, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, had managed to turn Russia into a communist country, which means that the workers owned the means of production and that they had collective ownership. In China, the Qing dynasty was overthrown, making the last of the rule of the emperors, and it was overthrown by a guy named Sun Yat-sen. Sun Yat-sen took leadership for a short amount of time, but didn't have enough power to keep his rule, so he stepped down. He continued to lead the Nationalist Party against the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Moving over to Mexico, a large rebellion was starting to take shape called the Mexican Revolution. The major causes for the revolution was bad land reforms and strong-arm policies created by Porfirio Diaz. He oversaw stability in Mexico, but he was unliked because he allowed foreign investors to have control over Mexico's natural resources. Another major reason for the Mexican Revolution was the arrest of Francisco Madero, who was an oppressor. He was jailed so Diaz could stay in power and didn't have any competition. This angered the people of Mexico and revolted. The revolt was led by Francisco Pancho Villa. He led the armies of the Mexican Revolution and eventually took over Mexico. After the revolution, Emiliano Zapata redistributed the land to the peasants and the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which was widely regarded as corrupt, began to control Mexican politics until about 2000. Lázaro Cárdenas, who was president, also started land reforms and was under the Institutional Revolutionary Party. After the appropriation of the foreign investors, properties, and businesses, Pemex was formed, which became the second largest state-owned company. Moving over to Unit 7.2, a new war was starting. Some reasons for this are because of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the leader of Austro-Hungary, by Gavrilo Princip, a member of the Black Hand, a nationalist terrorist organization with the goal of ending Austro-Hungary rule in the Balkans. This led to a series of wars due to secret alliances with other countries, groups agreeing to protect each other during a war. One of the alliances is the Triple Entente, or allies, made up of US, France, Britain, and more, who are fighting against the Triple Alliance, or Central Powers, made up of Germany, Hungary, Italy, Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria, and more. It is important to note that Italy did switch sides to the Allies during this war. Militarism was the attempt to prove their strength through army. This led to the beginning of the Great War, with people in places like Britain thinking that the war would be over by Christmas because of their army. Moving on to 7.3. During World War I, also called the Great War, because a war this scale had never been seen before, many technologies and tactics were created to help their side win. Conscription, which was compulsory enlistment, allowed for troops in war and always had an army to attack with. Total war was also used. Total war was using everything a nation had to offer to win. This led to countries based on war, or centered around war. They also used colonial troops with the promise of self-determination or the right to their own political futures if they won. However, they went back on their word and did not grant this to the colonies. One of the colonial groups which called the Anzac from Australia and New Zealand fought to control Gallipoli, a peninsula in Italy. The war lasted a long time in a stalemate, which meant neither side gained ground and wasted many resources because of all the new inventions created. Trench warfare, for example, which was when people dug new trenches that they slept and fought in, slowed down war as it was hard to gain ground, especially when those trenches had machine guns that could shoot hundreds of bullets a minute. Poison gas was also used, which led to lung damage and use of gas masks. Planes were originally used for reconnaissance, but were later equipped with machine guns. Tanks were also created to protect troops as they traveled, and they could shoot back. And they could shoot back. Submarines caused problems along shipping lanes, cutting off supplies. And U-boats were boats that were used to storm places like Normandy, and they were also submarines. Countries also used propaganda, which were attempts to make the other side look bad, and used it to justify the war and get their citizens on their side. World War I was considered a global war because the war was fought all over the world. However, USA originally did not join the war, but did due to the sinking of the Lusitania, a sub that had US citizens in it that was sunk by Germany, and the Zimmermann telegram, in which the Germans offered to help Mexico fight a war against the United States to reclaim the land they lost. After the Allies won the war with Germany, signing the Treaty of Versailles, in which they unconditionally surrendered, the Paris Peace Conference was held, in which the Big Four, US with Woodrow Wilson, UK with David Lloyd George, France with George Clemenceau, and Italy with Vittorio O. Orlando. In this conference, Wilson outlined the 14 points, which had ideas for the colonies and included not blaming Germany and the League of Nations. However, this failed as Wilson could not get the Senate to sign off on it, and other countries wanted to keep their colonies and have Germany pay them back with reparations, which was payment for all damages caused by war. This led to Germany's bankruptcy. The Weimar Republic, the leaders of Germany at the time, were blamed for Germany's problems as they had signed off for a bill that severely hurt Germany and led to the Nazis' takeover of power. All Quiet on the Western Front was a book that showed life of trench warfare to an average citizen. Finally, Unit 7.2 talks about the Great Depression, forms of government, and rebellions. During the Great Depression, which was a period of time when the stock markets crashed and the economy plummeted, which caused inflation, which was an increase in prices due to supply and demand. To counteract this, many countries created ideas and plans to limit the decline of economy and start recovery, which was the goal of bringing nations out of the depression. Deficit spending, created by John Maynard Keynes, was one way to help the economy. Deficit spending is when the government spends money to improve the economy, giving jobs and paying workers while the government goes into debt. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the US president at this time, did use deficit spending in America, which did help, but was eventually stopped due to fear that the US would go bankrupt. Another example is the New Deal. Its goal was to help US citizens to bring relief and reform. Relief's goal was to help suffering citizens, and reform's goal was to change government policies. The US wasn't the only country to create economic change. The Russian Civil War, which was the war that Lenin and his Red Army fought and started the rise of the Soviet Union and communism in it. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was becoming more and more communistic, and more problems kept popping up. This led to the new economic plan, which was a retreat from communism and reintroduced private trade. It worked somewhat well, but ended when Lenin died. After Lenin, Stalin came into power. Stalin introduced the five-year plan, which reformed the USSR into an industrial powerhouse. However, it also caused mass famine and death. Kolkhozs were a group of peasants that worked a portion of the land through collectivize, which just meant that farmland was given to peasants and they made food and gave it to the government to split. People that resisted were sent to gulags or Russian labor camps. During this, new ideas for the economy and politics were created. Corporatism was the idea that all parts of a company or economy were just different parts of the overall group. And just like how you need all of your organs, the economy or corporations can't function without all of itself. Fascism was the extreme appeal to nationalism, leading to totalitarian states in which the government controls everything. It was pretty much a dictatorship, or hypernationalism, which was the belief in superiority in one's nation. The Politburo was also created, which was an organization of all the leaders in a communist party. Popular fronts were also created. A popular front is a movement or coalition of people that were left-wing. Moving over to Spain, the Spanish Civil War was kicking into full effect. The Spanish Republic was formed after King Alonso abdicated the throne, and two sides fought for power. It was a fight with democracy versus fascism. One side, nationalists, were the fascist group that was supported by Hitler, and the other was the Republicans, which was supported by the USA. During this, the Luftwaffe, or German Air Force, committed one of the first aerial bombings on Guernica, a city in Spain. The nationalists won, and Francisco Franco won and ruled as a ruthless dictator. One region in Spain, the Basque region, also attempted for freedom for Spain, and it still fights to it to this day. This is Marcus. This is Unit 7.1 to 7.4. Bye.